For our followers, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do?
Man, I guess so. Okay. I'm Jeff. I'm a Toronto-based cinematographer and photographer, and I work all over the world when there isn't a pandemic, making documentaries and shooting photos for travel and tourism, for documentary purposes, sometimes for commercials, and basically anything I can get my hands on. But increasingly with underwater organizations, working in conservation, diving, and preservation of underwater environments and that sort of thing.
Nice. And then just quickly, for your followers that might not know what Love the Oceans does, so I'm Francesca, I'm the founder of Love the Oceans, and Hannah, who may well jump on this later, is our social media manager. And Love the Oceans is a marine conservation charity working in Mozambique, and we're trying to establish a marine protected area here through a holistic approach. And I'm talking to you from Mozambique, which is why my internet is absolutely rubbish tonight. Yeah, so we do loads of different research areas and community outreach usually, but obviously COVID has changed that up a bit. Mozambique is in a national state of emergency until at least 30th of June when they're revising it, which has put a halt to all of our research and our community work. So we decided to invest our time in some online stuff and making connections and providing useful content for our followers and things like that. So we started this Q&A series where we invite awesome people on like you, Jeff, and talk about conservation from loads of different angles. So for those of you that don't know, Jeff actually came out here for the first time 2 years ago. Was it 2 years?
2018.
And yeah, 2018. And you came out here with Photographers Without Borders and filmed what we do. And now Jeff runs a Photographers Without Borders workshop, which he would actually be in Mozambique right now if it wasn't for Corona. So it was rather fitting that we do this Q&A.
The timing seemed right. It's a shame that I can't be there, but yeah, I know what it's like to be on that side of the internet connection for sure.
Yes, it's frustrating. But shall we got submitted loads of questions for you, so if it's cool with you, we'll dive straight into them.
Yeah, let's go.
Cool, awesome. So first question, how did you get into your current line of work?
Oh my goodness, the question I'm asked more than anything. I did, also, you're gonna have to tell me how I do, because I did something that I tell, when I interview people, I always tell them not to do this, and I've done it, which I don't know how I feel about, which is make notes. I always tell them don't make notes, just think about it off the top of your head. And I didn't do that this time, so I'm breaking all of my own rules, which is I've already stopped answering your question and just started talking about nonsense. But into my current line of work, I mean, I don't know if I could distill what I do down into one thing, but in terms of like shooting films, I guess, which touches on almost all of the things I do, or just like making videos. I've been doing that since I was in high school, since I could get a hold of any old, I had a friend in high school whose parents had a mini DV camcorder, and so we would go to his place on the weekend and we would, stay over there and make stupid movies about whatever we could. So that's been what I've been doing for ages and ages and ages. And if you're talking about specifically what I do now, it was kind of a winding road, but I volunteered a lot. I find as a creative, you're always going to be expected to do a lot of things for free for a long time. So I volunteered a lot, and I worked with other people quite a lot over a period of years until I managed to get into a job where I could be paid to make videos and do that sort of thing. It was in sports, which wasn't what I would have picked, but I ended up falling right into it, and I worked there for a number of years. And then I worked at a travel company doing the same sort of thing, which is a lot more exciting because they would send me to the places that they needed me to film. And then I decided that I was going to go out on my own, and with my experience on the sports side and the travel side, I started my own business, and I've now been trying to work increasingly with different varieties of people and different types of organizations so that I can still be doing the same thing, but for different people in different contexts and different places.
Our second question, what has been your favorite place to film in the world?
In the world? I don't know. This is like, who is your favorite child? Like, there's so many great places. I mean, one place that I find myself going back to whenever I'm able to is Antarctica, just because it's so pristine and it's so unmessed with by humans that, like, I find that it is increasingly difficult to find an untouched environment in any capacity. And even though there's increasing volume in Antarctic tourism, it's still relatively pristine and relatively untouched. And everybody who operates down there is a signatory to the Antarctic Treaty, which means that they take really good care of it and they take great pains in order to leave it exactly the way they found it. Like the organization that I go with, G Adventures, they have a camping program, and if once you camp on land, absolutely everything must come back.
Yeah.
And so you have to think about that before you use the bathroom or anything like that, because everything that you take has to come back with you. But it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful place in the world. Like, you can have sunsets that go on for 2.5 hours because the sun never fully goes down, and you can have penguin colonies that are, 80,000 mating pairs of penguins, and you can have humpback whales, bottleneck feeding, and orcas, and you can have everything that you want there. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. So I would say, I suppose, Antarctica.
I'd say that's a good choice. I would love to go there, definitely, one day. It's on the bucket list.
I definitely recommend it. Yeah.
So that's your favourite. The next question have you got a least favourite place that you filmed?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, that's tough. I don't know if I want to string anywhere up. I had a lot of difficulties filming in South Sudan, not because it wasn't great, but because it's like a bureaucratic nightmare. Like, just getting into the country was 3 or 4 hours, and I had to have my photo taken twice, and we had to go back and forth and sign a billion different documents, and we had to have a representative from the government stay with us 100% of the time, and we had to wear these, like, credentials even if we were just out walking around on our own in a field. So that was a bit intense, but I mean, it otherwise wasn't a bad experience. I don't know if there's a least favorite place. Anywhere where there isn't. Mozambique is great. It's so relaxed. You walk everywhere. It's wonderful, and then there's Jess to take care of you and drive you around.
Obviously, that's great. I think we've got Chess back, so I'll pass you
all
on.
right.
If we cut out again, I'll be here. So we're not going anywhere.
Hey, all right.
Yeah.
Hello, I am back. Am I still frozen out of interest? Can you see me move around?
You're actually moving quite a lot more than you were before.
Yay! Hey, that's good. I just heard your comment about Antarctica. Although you said it was amazing, didn't you say? I seem to remember in a previous conversation we had, you were telling me about the journey to get there is pretty hardcore seasickness.
It can be, yeah. You have to go through the Drake Passage, which is known as like one of the roughest and worst seas on Earth. And on a good day, the ship rolls back and forth, and you need both your feet and one hand for you and one hand for the ship. And on a bad day, we confine everybody to their cabins and we bring them a boxed lunch. And there are people who turn green and disappear for a day or two, because the journey can take 2.5 days in quite bad weather. And that's just the journey from getting on board to arriving where you can see and do things. That's not including your flight or any of that stuff. Just 2.5 days, and the ship is just going boom, boom, boom the whole way. So I've been very lucky. Most of my Drake passages have been quite mild, but you can look on YouTube if you YouTube the Drake Passage. It gets called the Drake Lake for when it's mild, and the Drake Shake for when it's bad. And the Drake Shake is, it can be harrowing.
But it's still worth it when you get there.
I get seasick, so I'm the wrong person to ask. I have a great time. It's like a roller coaster.
Very jealous. To be fair, I didn't get seasickness too badly, but I got pretty seasick in Indonesia in January. That was the most seasick I've been in years, and it wasn't even that bad. So I felt a marine biologist who got seasick.
At the dinner table before we go into the Drake Passage, everybody from different countries all sits and exchanges seasickness meds across the table. So, the Australians have stuff that's illegal in North America, and the South Americans have over-the-counter stuff you can only get prescribed. So everyone trades meds and medicates and then, hunkers down.
Okay. That sounds terrifying though, the seasickness. I get quite seasick, so I'm not sure that would be for me, that experience. Okay, so the next question. What would you say are your top 3 filming experiences if you had to rank them? I know that's not easy.
Not easy, but okay. I wrote down notes here for this. So, okay, the first time that I ever got to shoot in water with a whale shark, which was just in September of last year, that was absolutely insane just because I'd never been that close to anything that big.
Yeah.
And also, if anybody who's ever tried to see a wild animal under any circumstances, you know that it's very much not up to you. Like, you can go to where the animal is in the right season, under the right conditions, at the right time of day, with the right person, and still not see stuff. And so we had taken this huge journey to go out to Darwin Island in the Galapagos, and, you know, everyone was still cautioning me right up to the moment before we got in the water, saying, now, you might not see anything. You might not see anything today. You might not see anything this week. And so I was like, my expectations were low. And then we got in, and within 10 minutes, we had like a 10-meter whale shark come and swim up to us. And I remember just being shocked because you're sitting there with your camera going, what do I do now? I didn't expect you to show up. That's number 1, I think. Number 2, I've written down. I did a project with Photographers Without Borders in 2018 in Chernobyl in Ukraine, which was really amazing. And the organization that we work with, Clean Futures Fund, is run by this amazing guy named Lucas Hickson, and he's spent many years of his life living and working in the Chernobyl region. So he knows all the right folks and has access to all the right stuff. And he was able to take us into the control room in the Unit 4 reactor.
Wow.
And for anybody who's seen the Chernobyl HBO series, it looks exactly like that. It's like that is very faithful. Only everything is, you know, destroyed now because it was 30 years ago. But that was pretty unbelievable. I have a photo of me just sort of dumbfounded, all dressed in a bunny suit and mask and everything in there. That was pretty amazing. And then I don't know. My third one's tough. I have this one memory that I don't know. It was my favorite filming experience, but it was just a lovely experience. I work with an organization called Giants of Africa, which is run by Masai Ujiri. He's the president of the Toronto Raptors, of our basketball team, and he's born and raised in northern Nigeria. So he's always wanted to give back specifically to Nigeria, but in more broader terms to all of the African continent. And so he runs basketball camps all over Africa, and now he's doing them in sometimes 6 countries, sometimes more. And one year we were shooting a camp in Senegal, and the gym that we work out of in Senegal is just maybe 20 minutes walk from the beach. So to warm the kids up one morning, we took them out to the beach and we did the workout on the beach, like on the sand. And rather than take the bus back to the gym, all the kids decided they were going to run back to the gym. And all of these kids were like jumping up and down. They all have like chants. Some of them are sports chants, and some of them are like just chants they know from growing up there. And so they're in, like, some of them are in French and some of them are in Wolof and some of them are in English. And these kids are just like, imagine 60 kids all in basketball clothes stampeding through the streets in Dakar, all like chanting and singing along for like a 20-minute run. And so I ran back with them, and there's video of it somewhere. I'll have to dig it up, but that was quite cool.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. All in different languages as well. That's crazy.
Everybody, I feel like if you grow up anywhere outside of North America, you know at least 2. I feel like I'm working on my Spanish, but it's poor on a good day.
Okay, Chess is back. It seems like she likes to pop in when the question's just finished. Convenient. Right, let's try and get back to Chess.
I missed your first, your favourite filming one. Which was the first one?
It was seeing a whale shark for the first time underwater, which you and I talked about individually just yesterday.
Yeah, but what? Mozambique wasn't your favourite?
I'd never seen one before. It was amazing. It was amazing. I'm sorry. Mozambique is lovely and wonderful and everything, but my number one, I don't know. Maybe if I'd made it this year, maybe that would have been the difference maker.
Right, I'll message all the whale sharks and make sure they turn up when you're next here, and I'll get you like surrounded by 10 juvenile whale sharks.
You got a whale shark on all of your merch, and I've been twice and I haven't seen one there, so I mean, I don't know what to believe.
Yeah, you just got to spend a bit longer. But
all right.
Up and when it's safe to travel again. Right. Okay. question. So someone said, in your bio, it says, think twice about anything you think you know, and it mentions the importance of uncertainty in learning. Can you give us an example of when this has worked for you?
I feel like I know who asked this question, so I'm hoping I'm going to give an answer that this person has not heard before. But yeah, absolutely. So I think that what I mean by that is mainly it's about keeping your assumptions in check, because I find especially when I was first starting out doing this, I thought that, like many young people, that I knew a lot about what was going on. And so I also, you know, I prided myself on being able to like use the context of a place to understand what was going on and try and overcome language barriers and travel barriers and that sort of thing. But I think it's always really important to remember that you know less than you think you know in most situations, particularly in an unfamiliar situation. So the example that I always use, because we talk about this when I teach photography, is I was in Cambodia and we were doing a Photographers Without Borders workshop, very similar to the one that I do with you at Love the Oceans. And Danielle, the founder of Photographers Without Borders, and I were co-facilitating, and she was sort of teaching me the ropes. And we were at a school, like a small school in Cambodia, and it was early in the morning, and a bunch of kids were filtering into the school. And so a number of the students were walking around and speaking to some of the kids and asking if they could take photos with them, talking to the teachers, taking photos of the schoolroom, and so on. And there was one kid in particular who everybody wanted to photograph just because he was like a bit taller, he was a bit braver, but he only had the use of one of his eyes. And I spoke to him a little bit, and I wasn't able to communicate much. Unfortunately, he had no English at all, and even his language, he had some difficulty speaking. So even with a translator, I didn't have a huge amount of luck. But I photographed him, and I went to the teacher, and I said, hey, I spoke with this kid. He said it was okay if I took his picture. Do you know his name? Because I wanted to write something about what the school was doing and why it was a good thing and so on and so forth. And the teacher said, oh, no, he doesn't actually go here. He's not a student at all. In fact, he's the son of the guy who's over there building the fence.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, I was in the school. He was in the school. He was a school-age kid who was with the other school-age kids. I was like, this is a student. All signs point to this being a student. I was 100% wrong. And if I had gone and posted a picture of this kid being like, this student in this Cambodian school gets a great education, I would have been an absolute lie. And this is because I thought that I just knew better. And so it's always really good. I ended up being able to tell a really great story about questioning your assumptions instead, because it's always better to ask, even when it's difficult to do that. It's always better to imagine that there might be another answer, even if you think you have it. And so that's what I mean to say when I say think twice about everything that you think you know, because generally there's a better story. And more importantly, it might not be the one that you're going to tell. So in the interest that people are well represented or correctly represented, especially when you're going to take on the responsibility of trying to promote their story, it's really important to have it right.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. You don't want to assume somebody's story, do you? Always want to get the facts straight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, next question. We still don't have Francesca. Oh, she's requested to join the call. We'll see if she comes on in a second. Next question. This is, I get all the difficult ones to ask you.
Okay, what's this one?
Your favourite animal to film? That must be a tricky question.
I don't know. I thought about this for a really long time. I'm going to say, in the spirit of Love the Oceans, I'm going to say humpbacks because, yeah, well, I don't know if anyone has ever been whale watching or tried to photograph whales, but it's like when you get a good picture of a whale, it's like Christmas. Because you know sort of what they're going to do. You know roughly how long they're going to be underwater, and you know more or less where they're going to come up, but you aren't certain about any of that, and you just kind of have to point your camera and hope for the best a lot of the time. So a lot of it is like holding your breath and waiting, and then a lot of it is trying to predict what's going to go on. Like the boat has to be relatively still. The weather has to be relatively reasonable. You have to be close enough without violating the wildlife guidelines, which dictate how close to the whales you can go. They have to come to you. Like so many things have to align. So I'm very fortunate in that I have maybe like 4 or 5 good whale photos like in my life. So I'm quite pleased. And when you do get one, you usually know as well. Like it happens and you go, ah, it was that's the one. That's quite satisfying when you can come
That's a
away
good
from an
one.
encounter like that with something good.
Well, if anyone hasn't seen Jeff's whale photos, we have quite a few on our Instagram because they are awesome photos.
Yeah. Posted
mean-
that good tail one the other day with the whale song, and I was like, yes.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. Yeah, it's insanely hard. I mean, even just whale watching, just you don't know where to look, let alone where to point a camera. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
With our ethical guidelines as well, you can't have the boat too close to the whale, so obviously they could swim away from you, and then you're like, no, come back.
Generally, in my experience, you have the wrong thing with you as a rule. Like, you know how like it rains if you leave your umbrella at home. It's the same. Like, we see whales quite a lot in Antarctica, but usually at quite a distance. And I remember I was I took my wide lens because we were shooting things that were close to us. I was shooting icebergs and like big stuff. So I took my wide lens with me, and the whales would always appear too far away. And I kept happening, and I said, okay, I'll take the huge zoom lens with me today. And what do we have? A minke whale comes up next to our boat. I'm talking like 2 feet from us, and of course I'm too close and didn't get it. So
Just trying to
whatever
be
you
as
have,
far
the
away
wrong
as
thing.
possible to take the picture.
Yeah, it's not up to you. It's up to them.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, that's the issue with nature photography, really, isn't it? That you can't tell them just to stand still.
It's
I'm trying
a
to
lot
tell
of
you
it
a
is
story. Stay still.
and just turn so you're into the light, and then that, yes, and perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
The
how
phone-
easy would that be? We need to learn how to speak to whales. That'd make our life a lot
Yeah.
easier.
If you've got any tips on how to speak whale, I'll come to that Q&A.
Yeah, well, I'll keep researching. Okay, the next question. Do you prefer photography or videography?
So this is tough. All my training is video, and film was always sort of like, or photography rather, was always sort of a hobby. And so I still find that I think about it in those terms, mainly because if I'm doing something for work, generally it's video. I'd say in 90% of the cases, I get hired as a video person, and wherever I'm going, if they need photography, there's also a photographer there, and then the two of us will work in tandem. So when I'm taking photos, it's like a vacation because they're just for me. I don't have to think about what a client wants. I don't have to think about where copy might go if it were to be printed. I don't have to think about any of that stuff. I just have to think, do I like this? Do I want to take this photo? So for me, like video is like work, and photography is like a vacation. And that's not to say that I don't love doing video. I do love it. It's amazing. But I find it's like, you ever heard the phrase type 2 fun?
Yeah.
Like hiking at altitude is type 2 fun. While you're doing it, it's quite difficult, but it's great. It's very rewarding after the fact. And I find that it's the same with video. Like generally it's twice as much work, and it's more preparation, and you have to hold the shot to sustain it through the duration of the shot. And there's so many more factors that you can screw up, and you have to think about sound, and you have to think about charging like these big batteries and carrying more stuff and. But then when you get to watch something back, it's so amazing. You're like, ah, yes, it all worked out. I made this amazing thing. So, yeah, that's how I think about the two things.
Would you say that storytelling is easier through video or photography? Sorry, that's not a question. I've just decided that I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah, I think it's easier through video because I find, and this is a crutch that I lean on quite a lot, just because I'm not a great photographer, is that when I take a photo and I try and tell a story that way, most of the storytelling comes out in the caption. So I'm writing it, and if I can't get the person to stop and look at the photo long enough to read the caption, then my photo on its own is often not enough to do all of the work. Whereas with video, I can just put a narration in that says the part that I need them to say, you know? And putting stuff in, like making up ground afterwards is also so much easier. Like if you're missing a line or missing a word, often you can just go and get that person to say it again. So I find finessing and getting the story to be exactly what you want is easier with video, and it doesn't need any support. If somebody sees just the video on its own, that's it. They'll come away with everything, hopefully, that I want them to come away with. So I would say video is easier, for me anyway.
Okay, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. The next question: what is your favorite camera for photography and your favorite camera for filming?
Oh man, I'm a very big believer in the tool for every task mentality. So I think it's very much about what you're filming. But I also have been shooting stills on a 5D Mark II for like 9 years now, and I have a number of times been like, this is the year, I'm going to replace it this year, and then it's fine, like it's good enough that I don't, like I think, and I've said this many times, I think this is the year that I'm finally going to replace it, just because it is really, really haggard now. But
yeah, this is the year.
Yeah, this will be the year, but like not because I don't love it, just because I'll be sitting next to somebody in a boat, or sitting next to somebody at a sporting event, and they'll do something quite easily that is quite a lot of work for me with one button, and I'm like, well, I should get that. So I would say the 5D Mark II is my go-to for stills, and then I'm a big red fan in terms of film. Like I shoot helium at the moment, red helium. So like I'm a big fan of that. I like having, if I can be nerdy about it for a bit, I like having ProRes if I need to shoot a doc and I don't have a huge amount of hard drive space. But like I shot something for broadcast on Tuesday, and it needs to be really bright and shiny and crisp, and so then we can shoot 8K raw in the same camera, and I can pack it down to be in one bag that can go on my back, so I can have this like cinema grade camera that comes with me, and I don't need an assistant, and I don't need a huge amount of gear to slug along. I can take it on my back and I can go. The only downside is that startup times are really slow. If the camera's in the bag and like a giraffe is crossing the road, by the time I'm set up, it's gone. That's the only downside.
Yeah. Come back.
Yeah. Once more, left to right. Yeah.
I guess compactability is quite important when you're shooting in remote places. Like I can imagine in Chernobyl, you have to have quite a small amount of stuff with you. Like
yeah, one of the rules I didn't expect in Chernobyl is when you're in the exclusion zone, you can't put anything down. So because radioactivity isn't like, it's not like a nice diagram of a circle like they show on the news when something has been irradiated. It's particulate, so it's arbitrary. Like this piece of the ground can be incredibly radioactive, and then this piece of the ground can be completely inert, and it can be that close. So one of the general rules is when you're in the exclusion zone, nothing can be put on the ground. And so I had to be able to work out of a backpack that I couldn't put down. So I basically had to carry whatever I was going to use every day. Like on one day we had a van, and then I could work out of the van, and that was all right. But some places you have to hike to or walk to and do that sort of thing. And it's just, yeah, so the smaller you can be, the better. And I think in general. Yeah,
definitely. Okay. What is something that is still on your bucket list to see underwater?
I was talking about this just like an hour ago, but there's this amazing, have you heard of the Yonaguni Monument in Japan?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so when it was, I think it was discovered late 70s or mid 80s, something like that. But there was like a big question about whether or not it was man-made, because it looks like it was maybe a town. And at first people were like, it's Atlantis, we've discovered Atlantis. But all of the rock in the area fractures off like at quite sharp right angles, the way basalt does. It's not basalt, it's something else. I can't remember at the moment. But anyway, there's this town under the water, and there's like an aqueduct and a main entrance and a square and all of this stuff. And if it is a natural formation, which it probably is, then it's just an incredibly bizarre coincidence that it looks so much like the way we would lay out a town. And you get the bonus of, if you have the right time of year, migrating hammerheads go through, so you can get big schools of hammerheads as well. So I've always wanted to go there. It's quite remote, like it's closer to mainland China than it is to Japan, even though it's part of Japan. And it's a teeny tiny island. You can drive around it in like 2 hours, I think. But that's something I'd very much like to see.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Are there any animals that you really want to see?
Yeah, I've never seen a great white. I really want to see a great white. And I don't want to do a cage dive. I just want to see one. Yeah,
definitely. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a whale shark. I'm in the same boat as you.
We get one of those every year in Mars.
Say that again?
Chess said you get one of those every year in Mars.
We get one great white shark.
Is that a fact? Really?
One every year, apparently.
One great white shark, at least.
Very cool. Okay, well, book them for when I'm there next. Can you book the shark in advance?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, we'll just be on the phone to them. We'll make sure the whale sharks are here too.
Perfect.
But don't worry, it'll be perfect when you next come.
If we could do it all in one dive, I mean, that would be the most convenient. Yeah.
Of course, yeah, and you'll have the right camera. Honestly, it'll be perfect. Trust us. Okay.
Perfect.
Tell us about your Galapagos filming project.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this actually. So it's nearly done. It's been like 8 months, I think, in the making. But I'm very lucky in that one of the guys that I work with on the Antarctica ship, our expedition leader, or one of our expedition leaders, is named Jonathan Green. If you've seen Blue Planet 2, there is an episode called Our Blue Planet, where they interview a number of scientists that work in some capacity with the oceans. And the section on whale sharks, they went with Jonathan to the Galapagos. His project is the Galapagos Whale Shark Project, and he's partnered with another project called the Marine Megafauna Foundation. And the two of them together, Jonathan organizes an expedition once a year where they go out to Darwin because it's a hotspot for whale sharks, and it's a really unusual hotspot in that most congregations of whale sharks in the world are juvenile males. So between 4 and 8 meters, male almost always, and they're usually feeding aggregations. They're aggregating somewhere where there's a food source for them. But in the Galapagos, it's completely the opposite. Almost all, I think it's 99.6% are female, which is uncommon, almost always over 10 meters. And we saw a few that were 12, 13, 14 meters, which is staggering. And they aren't feeding. They arrive, they're there generally for about 48 hours, and then they leave. And so one of the biggest questions the project is trying to ask is, what are they doing? Why are they going there every year, staying for 48 hours, and then leaving? And so I went with the team on their expedition just this past September to film some of the work that they're doing, because it's a collection of 5 or 6 of the foremost whale shark scientists on Earth. Simon Pierce came along. I know he has a project just up the road from you, from I Love the Oceans in Tofo.
Yeah.
And we had Dr. Al Dove, who he works at the Georgia Aquarium, and they have whale sharks in captivity there. So they do quite a lot of studies of whale sharks that you couldn't do under other circumstances.
Yeah.
So they're doing some pretty revolutionary stuff, like they're doing blood draw from free swimming whale sharks in the wild, so they can hopefully sequence their genes a little bit.
Wow.
And Jonathan believes that one of the reasons that they're there is that they're trying to find a place to give birth, because quite a few of the females that we see have really distended bellies. And so with a blood sample, we might be able to look at sex hormones and determine whether they are in fact pregnant.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
I don't think a whale shark giving birth has ever been witnessed, ever. And
it has.
mating has been witnessed, I think, once, and then attempted mating was witnessed on St. Helena 8 or 9 years ago. But they've never seen that either. So even though it's the biggest fish in the entire ocean, nobody knows anything about it. It's incredibly
Absolutely crazy. Wow, yeah. That sounds amazing. Can't wait to see what we find. That'd be really cool.
I'm excited, yes. It's a 30-minute doc. I'm hopefully going to get it into a number of festivals, and then if I can swing distribution with Netflix or Crave or somebody like that, then hopefully it'll be out and about for folks to see. But that remains to be seen. First, I have to finish it.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. Sounds really, really good.
Hope so, yeah.
Hopefully you'll get some awesome whale shark photos.
There's definitely some awesome whale shark footage. Yeah, I can promise you that much.
Okay. This is the last question of this set of questions, and then we can have a look through these comments. If anyone has any questions, just drop them in the comments. So any advice for someone looking to get into the industry?
Yes. Go and shoot stuff. Go do it now, because nobody is going to give you a good opportunity if you have nothing to show them. But everybody understands that you got to start somewhere. So the most important thing to do is just to go and do it. Like, I wouldn't have gotten any of my travel jobs if I hadn't just gone out and traveled to the capacity that I could and shot stuff. Like, when I first got my camera, I drove across Canada and I just got out of the car and shot whatever I could. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make something. I just needed to get better, and I wanted to shoot something that was like what I wanted to shoot. So I'm always trying to make a point of doing stuff. I find that when I describe a lot of people talk to me about how they leave their regular job and become a freelancer. And I find that it's a sort of a spectrum like this. And on this side of the spectrum, there's the job that pays quite well. It's often not what you want to be doing. It's often not thrilling. It's generally something somebody needs. It's not something that you're passionate about, but it'll pay quite well. And then on this side is your absolute dream, doing exactly the thing you want, the way you want to be doing it, making the things that your dreams are made of. And generally for that, there is no money. In fact, it often costs quite a lot of your own money. And so obviously, this is where you want to be, in the middle. You want to be at that magical thing where everything is the best and you get paid to do it. But I find that if you do some of this, you can use the money to enable you to do this. Yeah. And so I think you just got to go out and do it. Like this whale shark project, there are no sponsors. Nobody has asked me to make this. Jonathan had a spot on the boat. I was fortunate that he called me first. I'm going to try and make a film because this is the kind of film that I would like to make. And so if that one day gets me to the, shooting for Blue Planet 3, that would be a perfect situation. But if not, I still got to make a film about whale sharks, which is why I'm doing this. So go shoot stuff, make stuff. I don't care how good it is, just make it. And then on that note, finish your stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect. I find that I get hung up on I'll work on something and work on something and work on something until it's so perfect. And then by the time it gets to a point where I'm happy, I've moved on to something else, and it's no longer relevant, or it's no longer, it no longer makes me happy in the same way. And I find that it's often better to have a finished piece of work than it is to have a perfect piece of work, because especially as an artist of any kind, it's very hard to ever be satisfied with anything that you do, ever. I know musicians feel that way, and painters feel that way. I certainly feel that way as a filmmaker. So often the best move is to complete something you can be proud of, and if there's something about it that you're unhappy with, learn that lesson and then apply it to the next thing. Yeah,
definitely good advice. I guess it's hard, isn't it, with creatives? There's no really definite finishing point. You could always just keep going forever, so you have to stop eventually. Like you say, learn from your mistakes.
Absolutely.
Let's see, is there any questions in these comments? Has anyone got any questions before we move on to the quick fire questions? I saw somebody said they wanted to get their PADI cert so they could go to that monument that you were talking about.
Yeah, Christoph, if you're going to do that, man, I'll go with you. Let's do it.
I don't think there's any others.
Oh, here we go.
There we go. There you go. Take the floor, Jeff. Go for it.
Oh. Any knowledge of publications on whale shark population in and around the Indian Ocean? I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm not a whale shark scientist. I'm just lucky to be friends with a couple. So I don't know off the top of my head about Sri Lanka, but I know that there are a number of hotspots in that area. I know Indonesia has a few whale shark hotspots. I don't know about Sri Lanka. I'd have to look it up. But if you look up the Marine Megafauna Foundation or the Galapagos Whale Shark Project, they'll introduce you to some other resources and to some of the people who are likely to be involved with work that's being done, if there's work being done in Sri Lanka.
Awesome. Chess, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So
hopefully the internet will hold up.
Are you ready for the quick fire questions?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So anyone who's watching now who wasn't watching before, Francesca's in Mozambique at the moment and the internet is being a bit temperamental. So if she cuts out at all, I'll carry on. We've had one more question there quickly. Why did you go into the photography direction?
It was just I don't know if I could tell you why. It was always attractive to me, but it was also that that was a course that was offered in my high school. So I took it because I was really interested in computers and in media type arts, so video or whatever. And then there was no video class, but there was a photography class. And my mom had an old camera kicking around the house, and so I was like, well, I'll do this. This will be great. And I learned a little bit of the basics, and then it just kind of became a hobby. It was something I always was attracted to for that reason. And then I don't know. It's kind of just gone on from there. Sorry, that's not a very good answer. I think I just like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Cool. So, Chess, let's have a go with the quick fire questions.
Hopefully the internet will hold up. It's just held up for the last few questions. I was listening in, so hopefully with a bit of luck it will stay with us through the last bit of this Q&A. We'll try and 10 minutes anyways. Okay, right, so for those of you that have seen our Q&A before, you'll know that we do some quick fire questions with each guest that we have on. And they're just fun, random questions. So Jeff, if you can give some short answers and we'll whiz through them. Are you ready? Okay, first question. Favorite ocean creature?
Oh, chambered nautilus. I've never seen one in real life, but the coolest thing in the ocean for sure.
Yeah, that is quite a cool creature. Favorite day of the week?
Thursday, because Thursday is the Friday of Friday.
Okay. Plastic-free eco product you can't live without? That?
I have a water bottle that's like a steel water bottle that I've had since 2009. I bought it the first time I went camping on my own, and it used to have a Canadian flag on the side, and it's been so used that there's like one speck of red that you can still see if you look close enough, and it's been beaten up by being in my luggage so much that it doesn't actually stand straight, it wobbles, but I never leave home without it.
Wow, nice. Well, you're certainly getting its use. Okay, favorite beach in the world?
In Sarasota, Florida, there is a beach on Siesta Key, and the sand is so fine that it's white, and there's an osprey that lives on a building close by that you can watch fish, and the water is always nice. I've been with my family on holiday a few times. It's just wonderful.
That's pretty cool. What was the last song you listened to?
There's this great Icelandic R&B sort of funk band called Moses Hightower, and they just surprise put out a new single on Friday, so I've been listening to that on repeat. I'm really excited. They're going to do an album in September. Moses Hightower, check them out. They're so good.
Nice. Dolphins or sharks?
Oh, sharks, for sure. Sharks. I think sharks. Dolphins don't really need us to like them because they're cute, and so everybody, nobody's after the dolphins. But sharks have bad reputation, so a lot of bad things happen to sharks, and sharks are just as cool, if not more so, than dolphins. And I feel like a lot more people need to care about sharks if we're going to have any left.
Definitely agree with that. Favorite holiday?
Oh, I don't know. Favorite holiday? We just had Canada Day. That was quite nice. We sat in the woods and had a fire and drank beer. I'll say Canada Day.
Sounds like a good holiday.
Great. Very low key, yeah.
Be able to speak every language in the world, or be able to speak to animals. I feel like I know the answer to this one.
I gotta go every language in the world. As convenient as it would be to be able to speak to animals, there's no guarantee that they're ever gonna listen to you. I mean, if I could speak to a giraffe and I'm like, hey, can you go over here? The giraffe can still just no. So I don't know if that's really gonna help me achieve my wildlife photography goals. So I'm gonna go with speak every language in the world because I feel like I'm gonna be able to get to the animals more easily and with minimal fuss.
Fair enough. As a superpower, teleportation or breathing underwater?
I'm going to go teleportation because technology, I think, is more likely to get us to breathing underwater than it is to teleportation. Like a rebreather is already pretty good, and they're better all the time, whereas teleportation, I feel like, is a lot further off. And plus, I can just teleport to the dive site and then, with my rebreather on and be ready to go.
That's true. Although I was reading a new journal publication the other day where physicists have actually turned back time using quantum physics, but obviously only on a tiny scale. But like, how cool is that? It's pretty awesome.
I mean, big thing.
So you never know. Teleportation is like not that far off.
Crazy.
Very cool. What book would you take with you onto a desert island?
I think, what's the Stephen Wright answer? He says the book called How to Build a Boat. I think I would take The Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami because he's my favorite. I've read that book like 5 or 6 times and I love it every time, and I love it a bit differently every time. But I feel like if I had to read that for the 70th time, I would still enjoy it.
Fair enough. And first thing you're going to do once things return to normal?
I'm super eager to get back in the water diving. I managed to get a bit of diving done in spite of everything that's been going on with COVID to do my commercial dive license, which was wonderful. But it was done here in Canada and in Vancouver, where the water is 9 degrees all year round, which, you know, is fine, but not like great. So I'm really keen. I'm doing my e-learning for my dive master. So then I'll be as certified as humanly possible on the commercial side and the recreational side. So I'm going to get in the water somewhere where it's warm, and I'm going to do my dive master checkout dives so I can get that done and dusted. I think, yeah, I'm looking at maybe Mexico, or there's a wonderful place off of Honduras in the Bay Islands called Utila that I went maybe 10 years ago that I'd love to go back to.
Oh, yeah, beautiful warm waters down that way. Right, okay. That's all the questions. So before we wrap up, do you have any upcoming projects that you want to talk about? And we've got a few minutes until Instagram cuts us off, because they cut us off at an hour.
Okay.
So if you've got any kind of upcoming releases or anything like that you want to talk about, then feel free to plug.
Yeah. The biggest one for sure is the whale shark film, which is coming up soon. I talked about it a little bit earlier on, but that's coming out soon. I can't tell you exactly where because I don't have the answer yet, but it'll be before September. It'll be available somewhere to be seen. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think it'll be the best thing that I've done up till now, and I'm trying to find the right person to narrate it. That's the trickiest thing, and I'm really trying to reach for the stars. But we'll see. It's too early to say who might be possible, but keep your eyes open. I'll certainly post like crazy on Instagram and on Facebook and everywhere else that posts are sold. So if you want to see some stuff about whale sharks, keep your eyes peeled. That'll be the next big one. And after that, I don't know. I started a podcast in quarantine, which you were on, which was a great time. But it was very much about how things weren't happening. And now that stuff is happening, I'm trying to find a way to either rebrand it or to continue it on, because I really enjoyed doing that. But I need some conceit to facilitate the reason for me to call interesting people and interview them, because I enjoyed that very much. And I got to interview some really interesting folks. And I'm hoping to continue that on, but I don't know exactly in what capacity. But if you want to listen, I think I've done 7 episodes. Have a listen. It's called Not Happening. It's on Acast. It's on Spotify. Yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy it. I certainly have.
Cool. Awesome. So if you guys want to check any of that out, you can click on the top left-hand side of this live. That will show both of our accounts. They give Jeff a follow and us a follow, and you'll get updates on both of those, and we'll share Jeff's projects as they come out as well, most likely on our stories. Love the Oceans, we're just running this Q&A now indefinitely until things get back to, well, not normal, but until we can start doing our research and things again. We don't have much going on at the moment apart from the live Q&A. We're doing active research for as much as I can out in the field, collecting data on whale sharks and octopuses. So we'll give you updates on that. Otherwise, stay tuned on our Instagram, and we'll be doing a couple of giveaways, but we're slowing down on that front. But yeah, we'll be running these Q&As. Our applications for our 2021 volunteer programs are also now open, so feel free to check them out. The link for that is in our bio. Cool. Thank you very much for joining us, Jeff. It was lovely to chat to you, as brief as it was. And thank you, Hannah, for stepping in and running the whole thing.
Yeah, great to chat to both of you. Thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time. It's always nice to chat, and it's always nice to get to talk about the oceans and about what we're doing. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks so much for everybody for all the good questions and everybody who came and watched. I know here anyway, where I live, it's 2 in the afternoon, or now 3 in the afternoon, and I know people are starting to have lives again. So thanks for taking time out to come and listen to me blather on about things. I really appreciate it.
If anyone here missed any of what we've been talking about, this will also be uploaded onto our YouTube afterwards. Thanks so much, Chef. Have a great afternoon in Canada. And
Thanks again. Great to see you. Great to chat. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See you later.